Hello. I have SD cards up here for the Raspberry Pi class, so come up and just grab one and just hold on to it. We're going to walk through everything together. And they're right up here on the table over here in little plastic containers. I think there's more over here.
PA job start. If you wish to ask Kadia some questions, you meet me outside. We're running late with those question sessions. If you just want to give one person or so those questions, and then the rest can stay in the class, that's fine. And the same way with trying to say what team didn't get to see Adia. Pathfinders, are you cool? You need to see Adia? Okay. So, Roan, I don't know who all in your whole team. Yeah, okay. Sorry about that. There was just a big delay. If there's any instructors here that would like to work with a Raspberry Pi that does not have a Raspberry Pi, does everyone have a Raspberry Pi? You have a Raspberry Pi? Okay.
Oh, yeah, we're going to take care of that. So.
Okay.
Yep. Oh, yeah, you will need a laptop, though, to connect to it. Yeah, you'll need a laptop.
That's what I meant to.
Yep.
What time is it? My phone died.
It's 3:29.
Oh, 1 minute.
Yep, 1 minute.
I just gotta go to my office.
Yes.
Yes, we were going to be using the SD card I gave you, so make sure you keep them separate. Yep,
And one
good
is
question.
formatted.
Yeah, one is set up in a very specific way for this class. Sure.
Brian, did you want a Raspberry Pi?
Yep, I got Wi-Fi on my computer.
For me, my Wi-Fi's not working. If I wanted to learn Raspberry Pi,
Yeah, you'll need to
do
have.
I need Wi-Fi?
Yeah, you need to be able to use Wi-Fi.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's a state, yeah. We're supposed to get new laptops soon.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah.
I just got a new MacBook
Is
last
that
week.
through work?
Yeah, through work, and
Give me a Mac.
well, it's the work's laptop. So, but then I had to send it back because it broke. So.
You worked it too hard, huh?
I must have.
Yeah, my phone died. I'm really not doing well. Okay.
Okay.
Let me take that. I'm gonna help you.
Hello. Can you hear me with this mic? Nope.
Somehow,
I think this mic might need to be recharged or something. It's
because it was working and then it wasn't.
yeah. They can't really hear me when I talk. Maybe a little bit.
You have to like almost put your
I have
mouth
to
on
put
it.
my.
There's illness going around. You know what I mean? I've heard that there's like really bad.
Yeah. So I'll just have to walk around and project a little bit. So
Okay. Oh, do you have to walk around?
yeah.
We need to get you something then.
Okay.
Okay. Let me go see if I can find.
Okay. So does everybody have a Raspberry Pi and an SD card? Do you need an SD card or no? Okay. Okay, cool. So welcome to Affordable Digital Signage with Raspberry Pis. My name is Michael Hayward. I work at SCLO Center Region Library in the IT department. Oh, you can't? Oh, sorry. Okay, now you can. How about now? Okay. Yeah.
Turned that up and it's getting, nope. Yeah. That's a little bit. Check.
Does that work?
Can you hear that better? I just turned it up a little bit.
Excellent. I think that'll work. Can you hear me? Can you hear me? A little bit? Better on that one?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I'll bump that up a little bit, but I'll have to bump that down.
Okay, that's okay. I'm probably going to be using this more. Okay. So I'm going to need to walk around, so I'm going to use this one. So how's the noise level? Is it good now? It's okay? Okay. So this is going to be affordable digital signage with Raspberry Pis. If you want to follow along, the URL at the top is a link to the slideshow. Okay, so the goal of this class is, oh, sorry. Sorry. Sure. So the goal of this class is to kind of get you familiar with Raspberry Pis, what they are, how to use them, and then we'll get some hands-on experience with the Pi. You'll get a chance to come up here and set up a Raspberry Pi. And then you're going to go back to your computer and you're going to connect to your Pi remotely. Yes? That is a problem. All right, try it now. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Sorry about that. Okay. All right, so yeah, you're going to get a chance to come up here. You're going to set up your Raspberry Pi. And then after you do that, you're going to go back to your computer and you're going to connect to it remotely. So you'll be able to access it from anywhere. So you could actually travel around the building and just work on your Pi from there. So you're not going to need a monitor to work with your Pi. And then after that, we're going to cover some of the other creative uses for Raspberry Pis and try to get some ideas that maybe you could take back to your library and use there. Okay. So the plan is we're going to cover the basics of Raspberry Pi. We're going to have each of you set up your Pi, or we might do it in groups. We'll see how that works. We're going to connect to your Pi remotely. And then we're going to go through how to set up a display so that it shows, you know, some kind of like slideshow or an image or something that you can customize and then show on some kind of monitor at your library. We probably won't have the break because the last time I did this, I had to go through the entire thing. And then we'll cover some types of displays like slideshows or calendars. And then we'll also go over some of the other uses for Raspberry Pis. So the basics. So Raspberry Pi, the Raspberry Pi itself is $35. And why would you use the Raspberry Pi compared to some other type of device for using digital displays is that they're very low power. They don't use much power. So you could leave it plugged in on 24/7, 365, and you're really only going to be using about $5 in power. Compared to, let's say, a regular laptop computer that you're using for digital signage, that's going to be $10 a month. So you're going to really save on your electric bill if you use something small like Raspberry Pis. I'm just curious, how many people here have ever used a Raspberry Pi before? So a few people. Cool. Raspberry Pis are also open source. It has an outstanding community. So people come together, they make programs that you can share and use on Raspberry Pis. They write a lot of great tutorials for using Raspberry Pis. So if you're ever curious about how to do something, there's probably a tutorial about it somewhere. I know something like Instructables has a great tutorial that we're going to show you later on about what you can do with Raspberry Pis. So they have this outstanding community, and they're really open source. They share everything. And the Raspberry Pi is just really versatile. If you remember back in the makerspace, Bill Fee was talking about, you can set up a Raspberry Pi on an SD card to do one thing, and then you can swap out that SD card and it can do something else right on the fly. So it's really versatile. And my favorite thing about Raspberry Pis is it's just a great playground to just mess around in and try out things, try new things, mess things up, break things. You really can't break the Raspberry Pi. The worst thing you can do is kind of mess up the SD card, but the worst case scenario there is you just swap out the SD card for another one, and then you just reformat the first one and start all over again. So I want you guys to know that don't feel like you can mess anything up here, to just be free and don't worry about anything, because it's really easy to restore if something goes wrong. All right, so we're going to go through what's in your Raspberry Pi kit. I know some of you were already opening it up and going through there. There is an SD card in here, as somebody pointed out. This SD card we're not going to use. We're going to use the one that's been pre-formatted for this class. So make sure you use the one here. Does everybody have the SD card? Does anybody not have the SD card that I have prepared for the class? Nope. If you need one, it'll be right down here. All right. So inside the box is, if you look here in this white and red container, this is going to be your Raspberry Pi. And go ahead and open it up. And it's in this nice static-proof container. You can just slide it out. And we're just going to go over all the different stuff on here really quickly. OK. So it looks kind of like a computer board, right? It looks like something that you would plug into your computer. But really, it's a standalone computer. OK? You don't need to hook it up to anything but like peripherals, like a monitor, mouse, and keyboard. It can do all the computations itself. So holding it this way, so that all those big things pointed up, on the right-hand side, you have the Ethernet port. This is where you can plug into your network. Right next to it, you have 4 USB ports. So this is where you would plug in things like mice, keyboards, or other peripherals you would use. You can even use a USB camera. Do that too. There's actually another place to plug the camera in on the Pi. If you look on the board itself, it will tell you that the camera is actually this spot right here. So right behind the Ethernet port, this is actually another plug for a camera that you could plug it into. Going around this side, we have, so right now we're in the audio port area, which is right next to the Ethernet port. And then right next to that, we have the HDMI port. So the thing about Raspberry Pis are you can only use HDMI as some kind of like monitored port. So if you have a VGA monitor or a DVI monitor, you'll need some kind of adapter to turn those connectors into something like HDMI so you can plug it in here. Because there are no other video connectors besides this HDMI. Now continuing around, at this very corner here, we have the power connector. And that's where you'll plug in your power. And we'll get to that in a second. It's actually a micro USB connector, which is the same that some phones run on. All right, so now getting to this side, if you flip it upside down, on the bottom underside, that's where you're going to plug in the SD card. So let's go ahead right now, and together, let's plug in the SD card. Yep, you'll want to use the really tiny one, so you don't need the big adapter with it. The adapter's there in case you want to plug it into your computer or something. And so I'm going to try to do this with holding the mic so I can talk through this. So with your Pi upside down, you'll want your SD card. So with your Pi upside down, thank you, you'll want your SD card facing up, or so that the metal pins are facing down. So the Pi is upside down, the SD card's up, and then you just want to slide it in. There's not going to be any clicks or anything, but when it gets in, you'll know it's in because it won't go in anymore. And then to pull it out, you just pull it out. Okay? So you just slide in the SD card there, and that's it. So for the Pi doesn't have like a hard drive or anything. There's nothing on it to store any kind of data or anything. There's some memory on here, but really to store stuff is the SD card, and the SD card for the Pi is the hard drive. So on your computer, you almost never swap out your hard drive. You have a hard drive in your computer. You may have an external hard drive that you can swap out, but with Pis, they don't have like some permanent storage. The only permanent storage the only storage on the Pi is going to be that SD card. With the Pi 3, actually, you can actually do a boot from a USB drive too. So you're not actually just limited to SD cards anymore. You could actually just get rid of the SD card and boot from a USB. But for today, we're just going to use the SD card. So the only other thing on here, which isn't on that picture up there, are these pins. There's these long pins on this one side. Those are GPIO pins, I think. And those pins are going to be useful for doing other activities with like breadboards and stuff. So you can connect things like these LEDs would be good. You can create all kinds of stuff. There's a whole lot on it. I don't know too much about the GPIO pins, but all this other stuff in here, this is some of the stuff you would use with it. All right, let me see what this is quickly. Okay, so in the white box labeled SD components, this is your case. So in here, you can actually put your Pi in here and store it and protect it. I will also show you another case. This is another case you can get. This is the official Raspberry Pi case. A lot of people like to make their own cases. You can 3D print your cases. So you can do a lot of customizability with your case and make the Raspberry Pi your own.
I was just going to mention, if anyone has needs any personal assistance, raise your hand. I'll keep my eyes out for a hand.
All right. So the last thing in your box is in this ProElect box. And this is actually going to be your power. And it's just a cable. One side will go into that micro USB connector, and then you'll plug the other side into a power outlet. So I know you have power outlets at your stations. Don't plug them in there right now. We're gonna plug them in somewhere else for a little bit. Okay. So that's kind of everything in the box. So you have your Pi, your power supply, you have an SD card, you have a lot of other tools that you can use to play around with the Pi.
So, quick heads up, you have to take the micro SD card out and put it in the case. I know some cases you have to take the card out first. Yeah, you have. Yeah. All right, yeah, so just a heads up, take out your micro SD card, put your Pi in the case, and then slide your SD card back inside.
Yep. Yep, so if you're putting it in the case, thank you. If you're putting it in the case, make sure you take the SD card out, put it in the case, and then you can put the SD card back in.
That was Amy's idea, not mine.
Good catch, Amy. Thank you. Okay, so out of the box, as we discussed, the Raspberry Pi doesn't have a hard drive in it, so you have to supply the hard drive. And so that's kind of what I've done today in preparing your SD cards for you. you would normally need to prepare some sort of program for the Pi to run, because if the SD card is blank, it's not going to run anything. So normally you would have to have a separate computer, which you would then format the SD card, put the program on, and then you could put it into your Pi. The most common way to install the OS for the Pi is to use a program called Noobs, which stands for New Out of Box. And we're going to get into that in just a little bit. I'm going to go over some things to know. So the most common Raspberry Pi OS is called Raspbian. They're currently on the Jessie version of Raspbian, if you're curious. So one of the options when you get Noobs on an SD card is a Raspbian OS. And that's probably the most common one that you'll want to install. The terminal is a text-based interface, and that's similar to Windows DOS or the terminal in Mac. So how many people here remember DOS? OK, good. So yeah, basically the idea is you're going to type out commands, and there's no like GUI interface or anything. So the Raspberry Pi, you can use a GUI interface, but there's also a terminal that we're going to be using for just a little bit today for some fun. People commonly refer to this as the CLI or command line interface. All right, the commands, these are recognized actions that the Raspberry Pi or the computer can run. So when you're in the terminal and you're entering in commands, you would type in something that it knows. So if you just typed in some junk, just some random range of letters, it might not know what that is. It might know what that is, but it probably doesn't. However, if you type in a command it knows, like cat is actually a command it knows, which is short for catalog, it will actually do something with that. If you type in something like CP, that's short for copy, and then you can use that command to copy files. So just so you know, one of the hard parts about using the terminal is knowing those commands and how to use them. And it's very common for people to forget commands, and they have to Google them and figure out how to use them in the right way. And the last thing are scripts. Scripts are just a file that contain a list of those commands to be executed in a specific order. And scripts are actually a lot about how computers run. They just follow a very specific set of instructions. And we're going to actually be creating a script today on the Pi to get it to create our display. So as I said, the Raspberry Pi has a very basic GUI. It actually will look very similar to like Windows and Mac, but not quite. You're going to have, like at the top here, you're going to have a taskbar. You're going to have a start menu. If you click on the little Raspberry Pi icon right there. Going to the right of that is Chromium or their web browser. We have a file system, the terminal that we were just talking about. This is actually a program called Mathematica, I think. And then the one over here is Wolfram and Alpha. So yeah, the Pi menu is very similar to Windows. And the file system you can use just like you would if you use Windows Explorer. You get those files. You can click files, open them, all kinds of stuff like that. Or on Mac, it's called the Finder. All right. So the other thing about the Raspberry Pis are if you want to install a program on the Raspberry Pi, it's actually very similar to how you would install programs on your phone, except you don't get the nice GUI for it. There's actually a repository of programs. And when you want to install a program for the Raspberry Pi, you can actually just type in a command, a recognized command that it knows, which is apt, or commonly referred to as apt. And then you just type in install, and then the program name, and then it will install the program. The Pi actually knows how to do all of that. It knows to go out to the internet. It knows where to go on the internet to download the file, the program. It knows how to download it, and then how to install it and get it running on your Pi. So just like on your phone, if you were to go to the App Store and do a search, and then you find an app you want to download, you just click download, and it does all the work for you, and then you can start the app up. It's very similar to that on the Pi. The only difference is you can't really search in the same way that you can on the App Store. You have to do it through like a web browser or some other way to figure out the program that you want to install. All right, so some common commands we're going to be using today with the terminal. We're going to use apt to install a program. We're going to use nano to edit a text document. So to do that, you just type in nano. Nano is the recognized command. And then you type in the name of the text file you want to edit. So normally on a Windows machine, you would right-click, edit file, or open the file in Word just by double-clicking on it. But on the Raspberry Pi, through the terminal, you can type nano and then type in the file name that you want to edit, and it will actually open up a text editor for you. The other one that we're going to be using is CD, which is short for change directory. Since on the terminal you don't have that nice GUI interface to go into folders and go out of folders, you have to do it all through a command called change directory. So if we ever want to change the folder we're in, we're going to use CD, and then we're going to type in the path we want to go to. The other thing is, very quickly, browsing the internet on the Pi. If you want, you can actually just use the Raspberry Pi as a regular web browser. You could open up a browser on it, go to a URL. It works exactly the same as a regular computer. The default web browser on the Pi is called Chromium. But there's other browsers you can get if you don't like Chromium. You can get a browser called Midori, Epiphany. Iceweasel is the Raspberry Pi version of Firefox. There's one called KWeb. So you have a lot of choices. All right, so I'm just going to go through this quickly. This is basically what I did to set up your Raspberry Pi card, the SD card for today. So to do something like this, you're going to need another computer with internet because you're going to need to download a file. You're going to need an SD card, and you're going to need some way to connect your SD card to your computer. So the first thing you want to do is download Noobs from the Raspberry Pi website. The URL is on there if you ever want to go look for it. Noob stands for New Out of Box, and it's a very nice program to get you started installing different things for your Raspberry Pi. So when you download it, it's usually a zip file, so you unzip the file, and then you copy all the files to a blank SD card. So you can just take all those files and then just drag them over to the SD card. And you'll need some way to write the SD card. Usually those cost between $6 and $20 if your computer does not have that ability. And then the next thing you're going to do is wire it up. So you can insert the SD card. You're going to connect a USB mouse. You can do an Ethernet cable, but all of your Raspberry Pis should have Wi-Fi capability, which we'll be using today. So you don't need an Ethernet cable. And then you can just plug in the power and let it go. So when the Raspberry Pi first starts for the first time, this is actually what you're going to see. This is Noobs. This is how you can install stuff. So as you can see up here, we have Raspbian, which is the OS. We also have some other choices. I wouldn't worry too much about those to start with, but they're just so you know, Noobs will allow you to install other programs. But for now, you can just click on the one you want to install and hit install. And that usually takes about 30 minutes. So this is what you're going to see when your Raspberry Pi boots up for the first time after Noobs has finished. That's just like a regular GUI. You can see they even have a wastebasket, just kind of like Windows recycling bin. And then usually it's a good idea to update your Pi. And Pi updating is a little bit different than Windows. Windows, it does it all automatically, sometimes too automatically. But with the Raspberry Pi, you have to enter in those commands to update. So you can open up a terminal, and you'll type in some commands, apt update. So once again, we're using that app repository to update our Pi, to download those files and take care of installing them for us. So app update and app upgrade, when you combine those two together, will update your Pi to the most recent version. And also, I turned on the virtual network computing, which is what we're going to be using to connect remotely to your Raspberry Pi. And to do that, you open the Raspberry Pi configuration, go to Interfaces, and usually VNC is disabled, but I just turned it on to enabled, and then you restart the Pi, and it will have VNC working. All right. So at this point, we're going to have some people come up here. We have 2 monitors here, so we're only going to be able to do 2 people at a time. What you're going to do is you're going to bring your Raspberry Pi down here. You're going to plug them into power. Well, we'll plug them into the monitor first, and then the mouse and keyboard, plug in the power. And then what you're going to do is when the Raspberry Pi boots up, you're going to get it connected to the Wi-Fi. Okay? And you can do that. I'll show you very quickly how you'll do that. Okay. Okay. So the Raspberry Pi has a little symbol right here for Wi-Fi. You'll just click on it, go to iLead, and then you'll type in the password, just like on a regular computer. Then you'll be connected. And then what you'll do is you'll open up a terminal, and you're going to need to get your IP address. So we're going to type in a command. So you'll come up here, click on the terminal to open the terminal, type in the command ifconfig. Whoops, I mistyped that. All right, and then you're going to get a whole lot of numbers, but we'll tell you what your IP address is, and then we'll start getting you connected. All right, so we're going to probably start over here on the left-hand side. The 2 people over here, come on down, and we'll get you started with the Raspberry Pi. And we're just going to work our way around the room so everybody, or at least most people, can get a chance. How many? Give me a second. How many ports do we have here? 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yep, just the little thing should work. Just for Raspberry Pi. That's your Raspberry Pi and your power. Those are the 2 things you'll need.
Some of you put them in the cases, some of you didn't.
Okay. Yep. Okay. So for everybody else here, while they're getting that stuff set up, we're going to get our computers ready to connect to our Pi. So as I said before, we're going to be using a program called VNC to connect remotely. And what VNC does is it lets us share our desktop from the Pi to our computer. So go ahead on your computer, just do a Google search for VNC Viewer. And one of the first results should be download VNC Viewer Real VNC. So go ahead and click on that. And then make sure that your proper OS is selected. So if you're on Windows, click on Windows. If you're on Mac, click on Mac. And then go ahead and click on the Download VNC Viewer button.
Yes, there should be. Oh, no. It wasn't plugged in all the way.
Excellent. Wi-Fi. Yep, so it's the next one over on the right-hand side. It's with all the red X's. Yep. So it's going to need to start searching for access points. Yep, there it goes. And just go ahead and click on iLead. Type in the password. It looks like the numlock was off, so it didn't take the 14. Yep. All right, so is the power plugged in?
Oh, did we plug the power in?
No power yet. Yeah, the power will need to be plugged in. Yep. And then just go ahead and type in ifconfig. Yep. And then so this is the number you'll want, this iNet address. So yours is 10.3.120.240. So just go ahead and write that down on this little piece of paper right here. Yep, and then you just go ahead and take that back, and we're just going to unplug your Pi from the monitor. And you're going to be able to connect to it remotely then.
Okay, but I leave everything else.
Yep, well, you can unplug the monitor and the mouse and keyboard. Oh, that's a good point, yes.
So I just want to take it out of the market.
Yep, you'll unplug the monitor, the mouse, and the keyboard. Yep, yep, you just want to keep it powered up.
However, you're going to want that IP back at your computer too, so you might want 2 hosted nets.
Yep. That would be nice. All right. So come on down, next person. Make sure you bring the Raspberry Pi and the power. And then go ahead and plug in your Raspberry Pi into the monitor and the mouse and keyboard first, and then the power.
So do you have to safely remove these like you would a flash drive when you're done, or do you not worry about that?
So you just want to make sure the Pi is off before you remove them. That's a great question. If you try to remove it, or if you try to shut down the Pi too soon, you might actually corrupt the SD card. So it's usually good to do safe shutdown. So that's a good point. Oh, my thing is not that good. All right, so it's booting up right now. It's going to go right into the OS. And then there's going to be some arrows with red X's. You'll click on that to start connecting to the Wi-Fi. Okay, so has anybody had trouble downloading VNC Viewer? I know that sometimes Mac. Okay. You should just download the free trial. Actually, wait, hold on 1 second. Go ahead and, there shouldn't be a trial of the viewer, so go ahead and cancel out of that. I think you're in the controller, so go ahead and, X out of that. So yeah, you're in VNC Connect. You want to switch to the viewer. So it's where it says then download VNC Viewer in the middle. Go ahead and click on there and then download that. Good question. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Can you take a look at hers real quick?
Sure. So yep, you're in the VNC Viewer. Yep, so you'll download that. Yep, and so then it's just an exe and you'll run that. Oh, okay. What happens? Yep, so that's the way it should look. That's perfect. And then what we're gonna do is we're gonna put in the IP address. Yep, so good job. Anybody else has problems with the VNC Viewer? It shouldn't ask for anything. Go ahead and cancel out of that for a second. Yep. Yep, so you're in VNC Connect again for some reason. Go ahead and click on the viewer again. Right up here. That's okay. That's no problem at all. So then go ahead and click download there. Yep, and then just click on the exe that's down there. Yep, okay, so go ahead and click on it now and open. Yep, and that's perfect. Excellent.
How do you get to that
So to do that, you'd usually just run the exe.
Key, a free trial, or is
Nope, so go ahead and cancel that. So that's the VNC Connect. So you want to switch to the viewer, and then hit the download VNC viewer right there.
so it's the wrong one.
Yeah, in that particular case. Yep, and then so you'll just want to start that up, and then that should just pop up that white screen.
The one that we thought was wrong.
The one, yeah, sorry about that.
No, it's not your fault. It's my fault.
Yep, so that's it. Good. Okay. Sorry. Okay. So has anybody completed, have you downloaded VNC Viewer yet? Okay, cool. So for the people who are about to enter their IP address in, at the top here in this enter a VNC server address or search, that's where you're going to type in the IP address of your Raspberry Pi. So in the last step where you came down here and wrote down the IP address on your Raspberry Pi, this bar up here in the top is where you'll type in the IP address. So the one for mine was 10.3.120.49, and the viewer is handy because it remembers the other ones. The first thing that pops up when you do that is not going to be this message. It's going to be something about, hey, this is a new thing. I don't know what this is. It's like a new device I've never connected to before. Are you sure you really want to connect to this? And go ahead and just hit continue. And then you'll come on to this screen, which says authentication. So for all of your Pis, the username is going to be Pi, and the password is going to be Raspberry, all lowercase. And then you should be able to have connect and have it up. You got it? Cool. So were you able to connect yet? Okay.
I haven't been able to connect since I got here.
Oh, to the Wi-Fi?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Raspberry.
Or the password is just Raspberry, and the username's Pi.
Yeah, just every time I try to do it.
Go ahead and. Matt, I'm just curious what's going on.
I mean, last time I was here,
Okay, so while everybody else is getting connected, I'm going to skip a little bit ahead to some other uses for Raspberry Pis. Just why we get everybody set up. So these are some of the things that you're going to be able to use the Raspberry Pi for. One of the big movements with the Raspberry Pis is called the Internet of Things. How many people have heard of the Internet of Things? Okay, cool. So a lot of people have heard of it. It's basically this idea that, you know, all of your appliances, all the stuff in your house is going to be really smart. And they're going to be able to talk to each other. So, for example, your clock's going to be able to talk to your coffee mug and say, at 7 a.m. in the morning, you need to make coffee. And then you're going to be able to have nice coffee brewed when you wake up. And your refrigerator will have, it'll be fully stocked because it will know what needs to be inside of it. There'll be cameras that will just be able to monitor your food levels. And then, after you had your coffee and your breakfast, you'll walk out your door. And as you walk out your door will know to lock itself because it's talking to your phone. And your phone and your door are talking to each other. And as you walk away, your door will lock. And then as you walk to your car will unlock because your phone's talking to your car. And you get in your car and it starts up. So just this whole entire idea of all your appliances are able to talk to each other and communicate and kind of automate a lot of the stuff in your life. That's kind of where Internet of Things is going. Now, whether that's good or not can be debated, but it's nice to think about some of the things that can happen. So how does this relate to Raspberry Pis? Well, for Raspberry Pis, you can combine Raspberry Pis with a website called If This Then That. And what that website is kind of like a conditional of when something happens, do something else. So, for example, what somebody did one time is they had really slow internet. And they had called their ISP, and their ISP they had like no response from their ISP for the longest time. So what they did is they set up a Raspberry Pi to monitor their internet traffic. And when it went below a certain amount, they used If This Then That to start tweeting at their internet service provider and say, hey, my internet's slow, are you gonna fix it? And so their ISP was just getting bombarded with all of these tweets. And you can imagine the social media impact of something like that happening. So that's one of the things you can do with the Raspberry Pi. There's also a whole other stuff. There's a whole lot of other stuff you can do with it too, just by combining the Raspberry Pi with websites like If This Then That or Zapier. All right. So this is one of my favorite Raspberry Pi things. This guy in the UK made a phone for his kids. And it combined Raspberry Pi and the Amazon Alexa together. And so what happens is these kids would pick up the phone, they would ask a question, and then the phone, which was Amazon Alexa, would answer them. So I'm going to try to play this video. Let me try playing it on this one so we have sound. But it's really cute. Okay, so I don't know if you can hear it. Okay, so you don't want to start free trial.
Population of China is about 1,340,000,000.
What is 9 multiplied by 4,328?
9 multiplied by 4,328 is 38,952.
Okay then, what is 390 multiplied by 12,253?
390 multiplied by 12,253 is 4,778,670.
Tell me again.
What kind of shoes do ninjas wear?
I don't know.
Sneakers.
Why does the chicken cross the road?
That's really only the chicken's business.
What is Minecraft?
Prompt. California is at the region El Dorado County, California. It is 57 miles, 92 kilometers, east of Sacramento, California, and 22 miles, 36 kilometers, east of Placerville, California.
I meant, what is Minecraft?
Okay, so I always get a kick out of that because the kids are so cute. But you can imagine setting up something like this in your library so that your kids can come into like the children's department and they have a question. They can just pick up the phone, ask the question, and then wait for the call back. And so there's a link on the presentation that will take you to the Instructables. So an entire list of instructions. This guy wrote out excellent instructions for how to make something like this. So if you're interested in doing that, you can follow those instructions. And that pretty much this entire thing was a Raspberry Pi and a speaker, I think. There was something else with it too. I can't remember what that was. And also, you have a whole lot of options for kid programming with your Raspberry Pi. I will also mention that on the Raspberry Pi there is Minecraft, a Minecraft version of Raspberry Pi. So if you just set up a Raspberry Pi, get it to the point where it is right now, where you have the OS installed, kids can just go to the Start menu and just start playing around with Minecraft. But if you're interested in more structured learning, there are a lot of great resources on the Raspberry Pi website for learning how to do Scratch programming or beginner Python programming. And all these programs are installed whenever you install the default version of Raspbian on your Raspberry Pi. So anybody have problems connecting to their Pi that have used the VNC viewer? Anybody have, okay. So if you're connected to your Pi, you can go ahead and start playing around with some of the programming stuff if you're interested. Just checking out there's Scratch on there if you want to open it up, or if you want to see Minecraft, you can open that up too. So the other thing you can do with the Raspberry Pis are set up a lot of them together and set up a classroom of Pis. There's this awesome program called PiNet, and that'll allow you to set up like student logins for your Raspberry Pi, so they can start their Raspberry Pi, log in, they can do work, they can submit homework with the Raspberry Pis. It's just really neat how much people have put work into creating really cool, awesome open source stuff that you can use. Okay. 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 All right, so who still needs to connect your Raspberry Pi? Okay, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4. Anybody else? 5? I just need to know how many more outlet slots we need. Okay, so we have 2 people down here. Anybody else need to connect their Pi? Anybody else need to connect their Pi? You do? Okay. So we need. Okay, anybody have trouble connecting with VNC Viewer to their Pi? Oh, okay. Okay. Anybody else need to plug in their Pi, or are we good? Did the last 2 people up here? Okay, we're good. So when they're all set up, we'll be good to go to move on to the next step. And if you want to follow along, we're going to be starting at this setting up the display step right here on this slide, slide number 25. Raspberry Pi will have a different number. Yep, they're kind of like a phone number. And that's how your computer knows how to talk to it. Your computer will dial that number and say, hey, I want to talk to you. And the Raspberry Pi is like, sure, I want to talk to you.
Okay. I downloaded that, Mr. Hayward.
VNC viewer.
Yes, I did that through the, I mean, because I'm using mine. I did it through the App Store. That was okay?
Yeah, that should work.
Okay.
Just make sure you're on the iLead network. Are you on the iLead network?
Yes.
Okay, good. Perfect. That'll work. Let me know if you have any problems. Yeah, that's a lot of devices on the same network. People having trouble with VNC? A little bit of trouble here and there, but for the most part, it seems to be okay. All right, so the last person is connecting their Pi right now. All right, so what we're going to be doing here with these next few steps is we're going to be basically using a browser as our display. And what we're going to be doing is we're going to be opening up that browser in a kiosk mode so that we won't have any of the URL at the top, we won't have any of the other menus or the X's or anything. It's just going to be a browser, just that like middle part of the browser where normally the content would be. If you've ever used a browser and you accidentally hit F11, it takes up the entire screen and it feels like you can't do anything anymore. That's basically what we're going to be going for with the Pi. So we're going to be typing in a command, one of those recognized commands that the Pi knows. And this is just to get it started, to get you familiar with the terminal. So the first thing you want to do is open up the terminal if you haven't. If you closed it, you can just click this little terminal button again to open up the terminal. Right there. And it'll open up another terminal for you. All right, and now we're going to type in a command. Okay, so we're going to be typing in a command, and the command is Chromium -browser, and I think I spelled that right. And the command's in the slideshow if you just kind of want to copy and paste it. And the way this works is Chromium browser is the command. We're going to be typing in, or we're going to be passing in what's called a parameter. That's what the dash kiosk does. It's a parameter that works with this command to tell it to open up in that kiosk mode. So you want to type in Chromium browser space dash kiosk space, and then this last part is the URL you want to open. So you could actually change that to like google.com, your library website. But I had prepared a demo slideshow that in Google Slides that you could use to show you how it can be like a slideshow when you open it. So when you type that in and you hit enter, hopefully what will happen is this. It will open up a browser in kiosk mode and start doing a slideshow. Yep. I will go back over here. So you can, this is the command right here that you want to type in. Can you read that okay? Oh, okay, let me try this. How's that? This is the command you want to type in right here. Okay, so anybody having problems with this step? Getting the browser to open in kiosk mode and starting doing a slideshow? Okay. If you want to close it, you can hit Alt F4 to close it. If you're on a Mac, you'll need to hit a special key combination to also do it, depending on which Mac you're using.
Okay. So now we're going to quit out of this. And you can do that by hitting Alt F4. If you're on a Mac and you don't have F4, you'll have to use like a function key to do it. You can also try to do Alt Tab and try to get out of it that way. But that doesn't always work. So anybody have problems closing it? Do they still have the browser up? No, the viewer you want to keep up, but the browser, like the Chromium. Yep, you're good. Yep. So let's escape that. So go ahead and hit Alt Function F4, because you have one of those keyboards that's you'll have to hit Alt Function and F4 right there. Yep. Let me see one thing. Sorry. Alt Function F4.
I'm sure there are online tutorials for this, plus the wonderful Diana gave us some books for our library.
Okay, there you go. That'll work. Okay, so you're out of it now too. Anybody else have problems getting out of the browser? Anybody else have problems? Okay, the next few steps, we're just going to be typing some stuff out. So we might actually try copy and pasting from the slideshow. I haven't actually done this before, but supposedly VNC should let us share the clipboard between the two. Supposedly. Let me check quickly. Okay. I'm testing something out. Okay. So we're going to have to do this the hard way. Okay, so we'll do this the hard way. All right, so now what we're going to be doing is we're going to be creating one of those scripts with commands in it in a row that it's going to run. So from your terminal, type in nano, since we're going to be editing a file, and then browser.sh. Yep, N-A-N-O space browser.sh. And when you type that in, the screen's going to change, okay? Yep, just hit enter after you type in nano space browser.sh. What's that? Cool. Yeah, I haven't hit enter yet, though. Yeah. Okay. So after you type that in and hit enter, this is what you're going to want to type in now. This is a little script that we created that I created that will run the browser. So just to explain it a little bit, this first line tells it that it's a script. Specifically, it tells it's a bash script, but you don't really need to know that. It is case sensitive, that's correct. Yep, so you definitely want to keep case sensitive. So the first character is pound, followed by an exclamation mark, /bin/bash. Yep. Okay. So when you finish this, you'll have to enter in the secret key code to save your file. And that secret key code is going to be this. You're going to hit Control X, and you're going to hit Y. Yep, sorry, yeah. So you'll want to put in the entire file. So you'll want website is equal to, and then type in the URL. And then you'll want the third line too, Chromium browser space dash kiosk, $ website space dash dash display is equal to :0. And then after you have the entire file entered in, you'll want to do the special key code, which is Control X, X, then type in Y, and hit Enter. Okay. All right, so yep. So when you get this all typed in, you'll hit Control X first. I'd make a change, 1 second. Okay, so you want to hit Control X, and you can't see it, but at the bottom of my terminal, it's prompting me to ask me if I want to save changes. So at that point, I hit Y, and then it says, are you sure you want to save changes to this file? And then that's when you hit Enter. And then when you do all those 3 steps, you'll be back to the terminal, and your file will be there. If you want to confirm that that worked, you can type in cat browser .sh, and you should see what you just typed in after it. Because that's what cat does. Cat tells you what's inside a file. So anybody having problems? Anybody need help? Okay. All right. Anybody else having problems? Okay. So now we've created a script. If you were to run this script, it would do the same thing that it did before and open a browser. But we're not going to do that because we had so much trouble exiting it the first time. So I'm going to exit out of there. And now we're going to make this an executable script. So there's another command that we're going to run called change mod, or chmod. This is in the slideshow. Chmod space 755 space browser.sh. So what we're doing, it's right here. Yep. I'm just going to type it in over here too. It said command not found. Actually did something. Yeah. Nope, didn't need to do it again. So what this does is it changes the script from just a regular text file to one that you can execute. And that's important because we're going to be executing the script in the next step. OK. So we're going to skip this last step that says test out browser.sh and go on to the next step.
Because when you're working with these command line interfaces, it's kind of best to pretend like you don't have a mouse. You're going to use your arrow keys to move the cursor around like you would in DOS or anything, but just pretend there is no mouse and just use the arrow keys to navigate around.
Thank you for that, Nathaniel. OK, so now we're going to create, so now we've created a script, but now we want that script to run whenever the Raspberry Pi restarts. And that's important because let's say you have a power outage or something happens and the Raspberry Pi isn't booting or it has to reboot. So when it reboots, you want to make sure it restarts. So that's the next step we're going to do. So first, we ran the browser to open up in kiosk mode to test out the command. And we saw that it opened up in kiosk mode. And then we created a script that will do that for us. And now we're going to create another script that will run the first script for us. But the second script is a special script that will run whenever the Raspberry Pi starts. Does that make sense? All right. All right. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change directory, and we have to go into a very specific folder for this to work. Yep, cd space .config / autostart. And if it works, you should get there should be some extra blue text after your green text. Yep, cd space. You don't need a $. The $sign should be there automatically. It's not? Oh, well, that's weird. Correct. OK. You guys are getting errors? OK. All right, so then just type in, I think I skipped a step, sorry. Just type in this, cd.config. That worked? OK, now we're going to use another command called mkdir. This stands for make directory. And now we're going to make that auto start directory. Okay. once you've made that directory, go ahead and change directory into it. So what you did is you made a folder in the command line, and now you're going into that folder. Well, normally on your computer, you would right-click, create folder, and then double-click to enter it. But this is all in the command line, so we're telling the computer what to do with commands. Yep. Did you make directory first, or? Okay. All right. And anybody else having problems? All right. So the next step is going to be us making the script. And the reason we went to this specific directory is because this is the directory we need to be in for the Pi to recognize this as an auto start script. So once again, we're going to start up our text editor, nano, space, and then we're going to type in browser.desktop. Okay? And when you do this, it's going to open up that, that interface to start editing the text file again. Yep, you'll hit enter. And then this is what you want to put in that file. So just go ahead and copy what's on the screen into that file. Exactly as it is. I mean, it doesn't have to be exact. There's some things that need to be exact. This desktop entry needs to be exact. The type application needs to be exact. And this execute line needs to be exact. But besides that, everything else is going to be. Yep. So what this file is this file is structured in a specific way to tell the Pi what to do. So when the Pi starts up, it's going to look for files in this folder, and it's going to read them. And we've structured this file in a specific way to tell the Pi what it's going to be doing. So the first line says that this is a desktop entry. It should start an application when it starts. The name browser is just something we give it so that we can reference it in like log files or something. And then this execute line is actually what's going to be executed. So it's going to hit this file. It's going to see that it needs to execute this application. And then it's going to run the browser.sh application we created. And so that's what this does. And you don't have to remember this, because all this kind of stuff is online. And whenever I need to remember the structure for this file, I always Google it, because I can never remember exactly how it's structured. And then so when you get this all typed in, we're going to do that special key code combination again to save the file, which was Control X to say we're done editing it, hit Y to say that we want to save the changes, and then hit Enter to finish up. And then once again, you'll be back to the terminal.
I had entered there.
That's OK. Yep, that enter is not going to.
Yeah, and so then I did Control X.
Yep. You hit Command X. You want to hit Control X. So
Yes, I'm sorry.
that's OK. It's very specific. So now you want to hit Y because we want to save the changes, and then you want to hit Enter because we want to finish. Yep, perfect. Okay. So now, if you finish that step, it's ready to test out. So you can type in another command, and this one will shut down the Pi and restart it. And if everything worked perfectly, it should restart the Pi. Your VNC should automatically reconnect, so you don't need to do anything special. And as soon as your Pi boots up, it should open up the browser in full screen mode. So does anybody still need this up? Does anybody still need the text up still? This stuff? Yeah. Okay. So I'm just going to get out of there. I'm going to type the command shutdown -r now. Yep. Shutdown space -r space now. And then when you hit enter, your Pi is going to disconnect from your computer and it's going to restart. So it should. I actually tested this out already. Yep. Yeah, you're right, with this many devices. Okay, so what you should get is what I have right now. The thing popped up says attempting to reconnect. So what happened was you restarted your Pi, and your Pi was the one that was maintaining the connection between your computer and the Pi. And when you restarted it, it severed that connection. It's the same way as if you were on the phone with somebody and then you pull out the phone line. I guess that's a bad example because nobody used analog phones anymore, but okay, well, there you go. Yep, so that, yep. So mine didn't work because I think I lost connection to the internet. But you can see mine automatically reconnected. It does not come with a booklet of commands. Yep, so oh.
We were connected.
Mm-hmm.
There's Wi-Fi here.
Yep.
Does that mean that the Raspberry Pi could give me Wi-Fi to my computer, like a hotspot?
Oh, that's a good question. It actually can't like a hotspot because it's not set up to do something like that. So on the Raspberry Pi is a program called the VNC Viewer. And that's what's facilitating that connection between you and the Pi. Yep. So if that all worked, great. And that's it. I mean, that was setting up a display. So now what you could do is you could take that Pi, plug it into a monitor at your library, and it won't exactly work because you have to set up the Wi-Fi connection. But once you set up the Wi-Fi connection, it will just work. And so let's say you want to change. Let's say you want to change the website that shows up. Obviously, you don't want to show this, demo website that we have here. What you can do is open up a terminal, type in nanobrowser.sh, and this website line right here is where you'll type in that URL that you want to display. So, yep, you could type in. Yep, you could type in where it says website is equal to, you'll type in the website address there. And then then the next time you restart it, it will open up your website that you type into that website URL. If you want to test it, you can. You can change the website URL to something like google.com and restart your Pi again, and then that will change the website that shows up when it starts. So the website URL is this part right here, this https a.school.org/slidesdemo. That's the URL. So if I wanted to change it to be Google, I could type it google.com in here. So whatever you would type into your browser, you would type into there. Yep, first you have to get into the file to start editing it. Yep. And so there's one more thing I wanted to cover very quickly. So if you notice, your cursor shows up on your screen. And let's say you want to get rid of your cursor because you see it on your display. You can type in apt install unclutter. And this program you can download for your Pi, and what it will do is actually hide your cursor while it's inactive. And that way you won't have your cursor showing up on your screen. Oop. Okay, you have to type in sudo apt install unclutter. And there it goes. You have to include sudo in there. Sudo is a fairly hard concept to learn. Sudo is basically, what it means is I'm going to elevate my privileges to like an administrator for the Pi. So if you want to do something, if you want to make changes to the Pi and you want to make sure you have permissions, you have to run it with sudo. So that's why this didn't work. So basically it's the same way as if you had your Windows computer and you wanted to install a program, but your IT department had very viciously put in some kind of software that keeps your computer locked down, and you need to get permission to run as administrator. That's kind of what sudo does, but not exactly. Yeah. Yep, and now you can install unclutter, which is sudo apt install unclutter. Sudo space apt space install space unclutter. Yep, so that's the whole entire, that's the app store of the Pi, where it's kind of searching for the repository, downloading the files, installing the files. Until it's done. Yep. It should be pretty quick. And then you'll, the next time you restart, the cursor will actually disappear from your Pi when you're not moving it. So yeah, you might have to scroll down a little bit to see it. Yep, so it's done. So you can actually go ahead and restart. So to restart, shut down, space, -R, space now. Space, now. And then hit enter. And then you'll get disconnected again. Yep, and then when it restarts, it will show your new website, and the cursor won't be there anymore. All right, so that was pretty much everything I had. Yeah, that was everything. If you ever want to do this again, all the directions are in the slideshow. So if you just want to follow the directions on the slideshow, you can follow it step by step. If you have any problems, you can email me. I'd be glad to help in any way. Are there any questions about what we did today, or anything about Raspberry Pis, anything about? Yes? Yeah. That's not it. So I don't need SD cards back. Those are yours to keep.